grade 11s, it's me, your teacher. So the last time I saw you, we basically got into what is capitalism. We explained that capitalism is a system based on private ownership and profit. And we also went into what is a capitalist society. And then we had a look at America as an example of a capitalist society in the early 19th century. Basically how they had this idea of the American dream, where if you work hard enough, you will be able to become very rich. Key terms that came up in this point so far was the American dream, rugged individualism, laissez-faire, and I think that was it for the key terms. If we look at laissez-faire, let me just remind you that it means leave things alone, let things alone. It's basically that the government believed they should not get involved in business. So a business could charge however much they wanted for a product that they created. There was no regulation. There was import tariffs, so that means they couldn't really sell things overseas because it became very expensive. Sorry, that's the export tariffs. And the import tariffs made it difficult for overseas companies to sell things in America, which meant that local business actually thrived. However, because they couldn't sell things overseas, it led to overproduction. The government basically cut tax so that people have more money to spend. They allowed monopolies to develop. So I explained monopolies in the last video. Basically what it means is people that basically bought up everything of a particular type and then controlled the production and sale of that thing. They discouraged trade unions, so workers didn't really have any rights. They were paid peanuts. But even though it was bad for workers, it was good for business because it meant more profit for the business. America also got rich by supplying the Allies in World War One. So they kind of stayed out of the war until the end. And then when they eventually got involved in the war, they already made their money by selling weapons to the Allies. Some of the problems with the economy at this stage was that people were speculating on the stock market and banks gave loans without checking. Credit was encouraged, so people were spending money that they didn't have, and industry expanded at the expense of agriculture. So before I go any further, let's go on to the new work today, but I need to explain the boom-bust cycle. So an economy basically follows a very particular pattern. Basically, there's a period of economic boom where the economy does very, very well. However, it is inevitably followed by a bust period, a downturn in the economy. Once that happens, it means there's less business happening. People are not selling stocks and things like that. When that happens, it goes from a boom to a bust. It gets stuck in a trough, and then eventually, inevitably, there will be an upturn in the economy again because people will become more entrepreneurs, more business. They'll start investing again as time goes on. So the economy is constantly expanding and contracting. Think of it sort of like breathing. Sometimes you breathe in and sometimes you breathe out. And that's just normal. So a boom-bust cycle is a series of events in which a rapid increase in business activity in the economy is followed by a rapid decrease in business activity, and this process is repeated again and again. Alright, so there's always a recovery and there's always prosperity after a bust cycle. You know, maybe not a full recovery, but you can start seeing that businesses start picking up again. So the reason I speak about the boom-bust cycle is because today we're going to be speaking about the capitalist boom of the 1920s. So in the 1920s, America was over here. Basically on that upturn up to the peak, they were in a period of prosperity. So the capitalist boom led to the rapid development of motorized transport. So we started to get the car. I'm not sure if any of you are aware, but the first car that was invented was actually the Ford. And the reason it's called Ford is the guy that invented it, his name was Henry Ford. And he was the first person to basically put together a motorized vehicle using an engine. And because of the development of cars, suddenly the whole of society had to change. It was sort of like a revolutionary invention, because it changed the very fabric of how people were transported from one place to another. So up to this point, they were using horse and carts, they were using trains, but now this thing called a car makes it easier for individuals to get from point A to point B. Um, Sorry, I just realized I did not actually make this thing full screen. If you have a problem with it, just let me know in the comments down below, and then I will, for the next one, I'll put it in full screen. Okay, so like I said, the development of cars actually changed the way that industry was functioning, because if you have a look at a car, it consists of certain parts. I'm just going to jump ahead quickly and show you this. This was the first car that was invented. It's the Ford Model T. And you'll see that when you look at a car, it contains many components, right? So you've got the wheels, which are made out of rubber and steel, and then you've got the basic engine of the car, made out of iron, made out of metals. Basically, this whole body of the car, I suppose you would call it, made out of metal, the inside made out of leather, and then you've got the steering wheel that needs to be created. At the top here, you've got a covering made out of cloth, and you can see here there's a windscreen. There's no wipers yet, because wipers weren't invented at this point. So you can actually see that and here's lights as well. So the development of the car actually had a knock-on effect on the development of many other industries, because okay, now you have to create rubber for the wheels. Oh, now you need to create lights. Oh, now you need to mine the metal that is required to build the body of the car, the metal that is required for the engine, the coal that is required for whatever it is. And sorry, not coal, I meant to say oil. The oil that is required to allow the car to run, the glass that is required for the window. So the development of the car actually had a knock-on effect on other industries as well, because now the rubber industry is expanding, the glass industry is expanding, the light industry is expanding, the mining industry is expanding, because there's more and more demand for cars. People want to have their own private transportation. The image you see here is the Ford Model T, and I just want to bring you to a funny history tidbit. This is apparently something that Henry Ford said about his cars when people asked if it comes in different colors. And he said, any customer can have a car painted any color he wants, as long as it's black. Which I thought was quite funny. So basically meant that all Ford Model Ts only came in the color black. Alright, so let's go back. So there was also a rapid increase in telephones. So people started buying into the telephone industry, being able to communicate over long distances. Rapid increase in the production of radios. Enormous production of consumer goods. So we're talking clothing, makeup. Oh, especially makeup, because women during this time were becoming more free. And they started wearing shorter dresses, and they started wearing makeup, those flappers that I showed you at the beginning of the unit. So there was an enormous production of consumer goods. There was widespread availability of electricity. While electricity used to be a luxury only for the rich in the early 1900s, by the time the 1920s came around, basically almost every single house had electricity. Every single house had a radio, every single house had a telephone, and a lot of people were starting to buy cars. There was an increase in electrical appliances, so things like fridges were starting to be sold, ovens, everything that moved from gas to electric. There was rapid growth in the movie industry. Many of you will be familiar with Charlie Chaplin. He kind of rises to power, rises to popularity in this time as well. And then there's a rapid development of car manufacturing and related industries. So I kind of jumped ahead. I should actually put this bullet. Sorry, let me do it now since I can do it. So this bullet is actually supposed to go there. So when you speak about the development of cars and development of motorized transport, you can also speak about the development of car manufacturing and related industries. So the development of a car leads to the development of many other industries. And even industries that are only, like, I'd say the word tangentially related. So for example, once a car is developed, now you need to also develop roads. So now you've got people building roads going from one city to another. So they are also employed in that sense. Alright, so let's skip ahead. So here you can see the movies and talkies of this era in the 1920s. Charlie Chaplin in The Kid. So you can see the Mabel Normand. You can start to see that these people are making more movies. So a sound film was something that was new. In the past, they only had movies without sound, and obviously people were rushing to see these movies with sound, rushing to get involved with the movies and the talkies. So the movies were basically your silent films, and your talkies were the movies where people could also speak because of synchronized sound. So eventually we just got to the point where we just call everything movies, but there was a distinction in the 1920s. Over here, you can see a graph which shows you dwellings with electricity over time. Now, I know some people have difficulty reading a graph, so let's break it down into its main point. So what this graph is showing us is how the electricity production, how many houses had electricity from the year 1920 to about the year 1930. The red is farm buildings and the blue is all dwellings, so every place where a person lived. So you can see in the 1920s it's kind of around 30%. Is this percentage? I'm not sure if it's in percentage or not. But about 30% of dwellings have access to electricity. But by the time we get to 1930, almost 70% of dwellings have access to electricity. So you can see that this period of economic boom leads to more and more people investing in electricity. Even on the farms, nobody had electricity on the farms in the 1920s. But by the time the 1930s roll around, at least 10% of farms have access to electricity. So you can literally see the climb in the economy, how the economy is doing very, very well during this period of time. So Henry Ford, he introduced a new method of creating things. So what was happening before is that they were making each car individually by hand. And what he implemented was something called the assembly line, where he had like this long conveyor belt. And what he would do is he would put workers at a different point on the assembly line, and each worker had a specific job. So your job is to put on the wheels, your job is to put on the body, your job is to put in the engine, your job is to put in the window. And this made the time to make a single car was reduced from 12 hours to 93 minutes, and eventually it got down to 10 seconds to make an entire car. And as a result, because there were more cars being created in a shorter amount of time, cars became more affordable. So it went from $1,200 in 1920 to $295 in 1925. So you can see that drastic decrease in price makes it accessible to anybody in America. They can all buy cars. So car ownership increased from 9 million in 1919 to 26 million in 1929. So even ordinary Americans now have cars. It's not just something for the rich. I have to stop it there. I don't want to, but I have to, because I am at 14 minutes and 36 seconds. So the next time I see you, I'll continue with farm mechanization. Um, but for now, let's end it there, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.